In medieval times, peasants lived in a society where cleanliness was not a high priority. In fact, for many peasants, bathing was a luxury that they could not afford. However, when they did bathe, it was often in a communal setting, using whatever facilities were available. The first thing to understand is that peasants did not bathe as frequently as people do today. It was not uncommon for a peasant to go weeks or even months without bathing. This was partly due to the lack of access to clean water and the primitive nature of bathing facilities, but it was also a cultural attitude. In medieval times, cleanliness was not seen as a virtue in and of itself, and in fact, there was a widespread belief that excessive bathing could be harmful to one's health. When peasants did bathe, it was often in a communal setting. In rural areas, this might involve bathing in a river or stream, or a nearby pond or lake. In urban areas, communal bathhouses were available, although they were often too expensive for peasants to use regularly. Instead, peasants might opt for public fountains or water pumps, which they would use to splash water on themselves in a process known as sponging. Other methods were available for those who could not afford to bathe in a communal setting. One of the most common was the use of herbs and scented oils to mask body odor. Peasants would rub these substances on their skin or clothing, in an attempt to make themselves smell better. They might also use powders or other substances to absorb sweat or wear layers of clothing to cover up any odor. Another method that peasants used to stay clean was the practice of washing their hands and faces regularly. This was particularly important for peasants who worked with their hands, such as farmers or artisans. To wash their hands, peasants might use a basin or other container filled with water, along with a bar of soap or some other cleaning agent. To wash their face, they might use a cloth or sponge dipped in water. For those who could afford it, there were also a few luxury items that could be used to improve personal hygiene. One of these was a tooth stick, a thin stick that was used to clean the teeth. The stick would be dipped in water, and then rubbed back and forth across the teeth to remove any food particles or debris. Another luxury item was a comb, which could be used to groom the hair and remove any lice or other pests. Despite the challenges of maintaining personal hygiene in medieval times, it is important to remember that peasants were not inherently unclean or unhygienic. Rather, they lived in a society where the resources and facilities for staying clean were limited, and where the cultural attitudes towards cleanliness were different from those of modern times. By understanding the methods and practices that peasants used to stay clean, we can gain a better appreciation for the challenges that they faced in their daily lives. In medieval times, bathhouses were a common feature of many communities throughout Europe and the Islamic world. These public facilities provided people with a place to bathe and socialize, as well as a variety of other services. One of the most important functions of medieval bathhouses was to provide people with a place to bathe. In an era when cleanliness was not a high priority for many people, the availability of public bathing facilities was a welcome luxury. Bathhouses were typically built near a source of water, such as a river or well, and were often located in the center of town for easy access. Some bathhouses were built as part of larger public facilities, such as markets or guild halls, while others were standalone structures. Bathhouses were typically constructed of stone or brick, with high ceilings and large windows to allow for plenty of light and ventilation. The interior of the bathhouse was divided into separate rooms or areas for different types of bathing, such as hot or cold water baths, steam rooms, and saunas. The bathhouse might also have separate areas for men and women or different social classes. For example, in Islamic societies, bathhouses were often segregated by gender and social class, with separate areas for women, men, and elites. In addition to bathing, bathhouses in medieval times offered a wide range of other services. These included massage, hair removal, and even medical treatments. Some bathhouses had barber shops or beauty salons, while others offered food, drink, gambling, or entertainment. The social aspect of bathhouses was also important, as they provided a place for people to gather and socialize. Bathhouses were often the site of important community events, such as weddings, celebrations, or political meetings. Bathing in medieval times was not just a matter of hygiene. It was also a cultural practice with significant symbolic meaning. In many societies, bathing was associated with religious purity and ritual cleansing. In some Christian communities, for example, baptism was seen as a form of spiritual cleansing, while in Islamic societies, ablution ritual washing was an important part of daily prayer. The act of bathing was also associated with social status and wealth. In some societies, only the wealthy or elite had access to bathhouses, while in others, communal bathing was seen as a sign of egalitarianism and social cohesion. In our modern society, when you go to a public pool, you will find that a good percentage of the water you swim in is mixed with chlorine to kill most of the bacteria that are brought in. Well, in the 14th century, chlorine wasn't as readily available and as such wasn't used, therefore you would have hundreds of people bathing in the same water. Some of these public baths didn't change the water regularly, they would just add some more or wait for it to rain if the bath was outside. As people were not aware of hygiene, many who came to these public baths had open wounds which would come into contact with germs brought in by others, causing the wound to gangrene and the person to either have a limb cut off or die. Another perspective to keep in mind is that most people in the 14th century were filthy, especially those using public baths, as most people were hard labor workers full of oil, sweat, and dirt from head to toe. Don't imagine that these people came here every day. As I mentioned before, hygiene was not something that people worried about, so they usually would attend such public baths once a week or even once a month. An interesting study has been recently conducted where they analyzed the sort of immune system people from the medieval era had. From the results, they conclude that people from the medieval era 12th to 15th century had an immune system that was 2 times stronger than the average person in today's society. Nevertheless, this does not excuse not washing more often, especially living in a time when diseases and plagues were everywhere. The contact that was taking place in such baths certainly didn't help. You can imagine the sort of place this was, a place where you had to bring your children to get cleaned. Those present had to bear witness to sexual abuse at a time when it wasn't taboo. You would have your low-class worker that would come here after a few drinks which would influence their sexual urges. It is also mentioned in some historical books which are representing the social aspect of the medieval era that some women went to public baths to have their way with a man. Now you can imagine that it wasn't just germs floating about these waters. So closely associated are sex and bathing. Numerous slang phrases for sex are derived from the medieval bathhouses. Lather, as in to lather up, was 16th century slang for ejaculation. The word bagno, meaning a brothel, derives from the Latin balneum, meaning bath. Many prostitutes would bring some of their clients to such public baths and do their business in front of everyone. By looking at this, we can see how much we have evolved as a society, but also in some cases proving that there is still a lot of space for improvement. For society back in the medieval era, such activities were seen as something normal due to their different mindset that was more simplistic, as it wasn't influenced by any external factors. In medieval times, the bathing practices of kings were vastly different from those of the average person. While peasants often went without bathing for long periods, kings had access to a range of luxurious and sophisticated bathing facilities. One of the main factors that distinguished the bathing practices of kings from those of peasants was the availability of clean water. While peasants often had to make do with dirty or contaminated water sources, kings had access to fresh water that was collected from natural springs or transported via aqueducts. This water was then heated in large cauldrons or cisterns, which were kept warm with fires or heated stones. One of the most important aspects of a king's bathing experience was the environment in which it took place. Kings had access to private bathing chambers, which were often elaborately decorated and furnished with expensive materials such as marble, gold, and silver. These chambers were also equipped with a range of amenities, including large mirrors, comfortable seating, and even music or entertainment. When a king was ready to take a bath, he would be attended by a group of servants or attendants, who would assist him with undressing and entering the bath. In some cases, the king might also be accompanied by his closest advisors or confidants, who would provide him with counsel or conversation while he bathed. The bath itself was often a complex and multi-step process. Before entering the water, the king might first be given a massage or scrub with scented oils or powders. This was intended to exfoliate the skin and remove any dirt or impurities. Once the king had entered the bath, he would be given a range of soaps, lotions, and other cleaning agents, which were designed to cleanse and moisturize the skin. During the bath, the king might also be served refreshments such as wine or fruit, and might even have a meal or banquet brought to him. In some cases, the bath might also be accompanied by entertainment, such as music or dance performances. This was intended to make the bathing experience as relaxing and enjoyable as possible. Once the king had finished bathing, he would be dried off with soft towels or linens and then dressed in fresh clothing. This clothing would often be made of expensive materials and might be adorned with jewels or other embellishments. However, it seems that church officials had little influence on bathhouses in the Middle Ages. Medieval people seem to have accepted that the bathhouse was not only a place to get clean and healthy, but it could also a place where sex and prostitution could occur. The prominence of the public bathhouse went into rapid decline in the 16th century. Several suggestions have been made as to why. Were more puritanical religious people able to impose their moral values on the community, or were the diseases that struck Europe since the Black Death convincing people to avoid them? The disease of syphilis, which broke out in Europe in the late 15th century, would have also motivated people to stop their sexual promiscuity, thus reducing the other reasons for having a bathhouse. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more videos.